It's always inspiring. One of the funnest things we get to do at Fordham is our work in Ohio, where we do on-the-ground school reform work, and we we sponsor charter schools, authorized charter schools. And, it's still 20 years later, the excitement of seeing a group of committed parents and citizens coming together to create a school of their dreams, there's just nothing better than it. I just love it. So welcome to Fordham. This is an event that Basis DC is hosting, so it's not a Fordham event, but we're very glad to use the conference facility that we have here today. And I'm honored to get to moderate this panel about what's a very exciting school idea for DC, a school based on some tremendously high-performing schools in Arizona and elsewhere. We're going to get to learn more about that school today and then talk about, in particular, the interest in the DC committee in making sure that this is a school that is a diverse school, that's racially and socioeconomically diverse, which is something that Washington, D.C. does not have enough of today, our schools that serve kids from all parts of the city and from all backgrounds. So before we jump into that discussion with our great panel here, we're going to see a short 5-minute video about one of the original Basis schools in Arizona. So let's take it away with that.
Okay, good. That one is fine. I found another translation. I like it even better.
I don't think you do have to be a genius to succeed here. You just have to be really motivated, and you have to want it, and you have to keep working at it.
I'm taking pre-calculus, AP psychology,
US history,
AP biology.
In the 8th grade, I'm in an accelerated physics class.
English literature, English language.
Between photography and English language.
It's AP calculus.
And right now, we're doing things that are at the level of AP C mechanics.
French, honors biology, and AP government.
Okay, so the end result here is this field. From this charge, it points radially out, but it's pointing in this direction in the neighborhood of the conductor.
The kid who does well at Basis is the kid who commits to this very sort of challenging, high-stakes curriculum.
Everyone here has the capacity to learn, and Basis addresses everyone's needs.
To succeed through Basis, you can't fall asleep and you have to work hard.
We're definitely making sure that I was understanding what was going on in the classes.
Teachers definitely paid attention. They knew exactly if I was messing up in school, I would be continuously helped with exactly what I needed to catch up. And if I wanted to exceed in something, they'd give me actually the steps to exceed in that. I mean, I was never really a step below where I thought I needed to be because of the such help I got from the teachers at Basis.
I actually connected with them, and they treated me like a human being instead of a receptacle for knowledge.
When I first started here at Basis halfway through 7th grade, for some subjects like chemistry and physics, I had no level experience at my other school. They just did not provide these classes, but I caught up, and soon I was helping other students with their own work.
Teacher is defined beyond a state. Someone that wants to teach and is feel passionate about their subject. They will be thrilled to be with a group of students that wants to learn.
Raise me up to more than I can
los padres de población hispana. Ha sido un privilegio trabajar aquí en Basis. He comprobado este año que los estudiantes tienen magníficas oportunidades y tenemos un niño que va a Harvard este año y tenemos una niña que ha sido aceptada a Dartmouth, en Williams, en Swarthmore, y está decidiendo a qué escuela va a ir. Tengo la esperanza de que va a ser casi gratis, va a tener mucha ayuda financiera, entonces Basis es una oportunidad que queremos brindarle a todos ustedes. So, esperamos que vengan con nosotros y aprendan y trabajen fuerte. Suerte.
Basis is absolutely not just for rich white kids. It is for anyone who's willing to apply themselves.
There's a tremendous range of students from all socioeconomic backgrounds and all ethnicities. And I think families are looking for that. They want to see that their child is in a diverse community.
My friend Nicole is Filipino, and Clover is half African, half French, and then we have all these Hispanic kids, and there's so much diversity in our class.
Most of us are minorities. There's a great mix, which is why I like spending my time here.
All my children that go here, the kids that they're going to school with, they're not all white kids. Like my daughter, her friends are Hispanic just like her, and others. Just if you're here, you could see that.
Tells me that they haven't been inside of our campus. Every student that walks into a Basis school and is willing to work hard can be successful.
I was accepted at Middlebury College, Swarthmore, Grinnell, Wesleyan University, Carleton College, and Dartmouth.
We had our acceptance at Harvard and Dartmouth, Williams and UPenn, and Duke and MIT.
I really firmly believe that because of the fact that I went to the school, I got accepted to Harvard.
I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the wealth. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Thanks to Bob here, who put that video together and is also the director of many well-known movies, including the 2 Million Minutes that came out several years ago. And the most recent one, the Finland Phenomenon, is that right? Our boss here at Fordham, Chester Finn, will be glad to watch that one and see what it says. Okay. All right. All right. So again, a great introduction to the school at Basis. So what I love about the willingness of the committee that's putting the school together is to address the elephant in the room. There's been questions in the press and at some of the community meetings raised about the school. And it's these issues that are always come right to light in D.C. around race and class. And, various ways people ask it and maybe don't come right out and say it. But the question is, okay, this is a really challenging school. This is a school where kids are going to be expected to take AP courses in the 9th grade, pass 6 AP tests in order to graduate. Are you sure that our kids in Washington, D.C. are going to be up for this challenge? And behind some of those sentiments are the question. We know we have a lot of kids in D.C. that are below grade level right now, and that many of those kids are poor, are African American, are Hispanic. Will this school be able to serve them? And if not, is this just going to be a school for upper middle class white kids in D.C.? Is this part of the trend towards gentrification and all of those kinds of painful issues? The fact that the folks here on this panel today have been willing to jump into the fray and talk about these difficult issues head on is a real testament, particularly to our elected official that's here with us, and we appreciate that, to put him on the hot seat. And the question is this broader question. what can we do in this country here in 2011 to create schools that are racially and socioeconomically integrated? Why haven't we made more progress on that? And is the charter school sector a particular place where there's potential, where this is a place where schools can create diverse environments on purpose, that everybody is there by choice? There is no social engineering or coercion or busing or anything, those kinds of things that raise other issues from earlier generations of trying to do this work. Is this an opportunity for people who care about creating diverse schools to come together and make that happen? And could Basis DC be one of those schools? So we're going to talk about all of that today. We've got an amazing panel, and particularly in the sort of short notice that this was pulled together on, we appreciate them being here. We're going to start with Sekou Biddle, who is a DC at-large council member and is up for re-election right now, or I guess his initial election, as he was appointed to that. We have Richard Kahlenberg, Senior Fellow at the Century Foundation, Jeanne Allen, President of the Center for Education Reform, and Sam Chaltain, did I say that right, Sam? Yeah. The former chair of the Inspired Teaching School. So we're going to have a kind of a moderated discussion up here and then get you all involved in a conversation, and I very much look forward to it. So they're not going to give speeches to start out. We're going to plunge right into some questions. So let me start with Councilmember. What is it about this school, the Basis DC school, that you find so promising and worth getting around here in Washington, D.C.?
Sure, and so I need to turn this on. Is that?
Let's see. Try this here. There you go.
There we go. That is on, apparently. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming out. So the question was, what is it about the school that I find so interesting? I guess a little bit about me to sort of put this in perspective. I grew up here in the District of Columbia, and I grew up in Columbia Heights during the 70s and 80s. So for those of you who are familiar with the city and have been here for some period of time, it's a dramatically different neighborhood than it is today. It was extremely low income, well underdeveloped. There was very little retail. Quality of life in the community was very, very low. It was a place that wasn't very safe, and it was a place that at the time still was served by some pretty low-performing schools. So my parents sent me across the city to attend DC public schools that were much better. So I went out of boundary to Stevens and to Deal, Wilson. I also went to elementary school at John Eaton. And, clearly a quality and high-quality education is the most important thing to any child's life and has the most impact on their trajectory toward, college careers and beyond. And so, I went to Wilson, and at the time, and it still is, Wilson was the most diverse high school in the city, pulling students from across the city geographically, but also in terms of socioeconomic and ethnic diversity, was the most diverse campus in the city as it is today. And certainly there's an inherent benefit to having a diverse campus, but part of the reason it attracted such diversity was it provided an opportunity for excellence for any and all students that attended. So whether they were, upper middle class, professionals who, doctors and lawyers who were sending their children to a school where they could take AP classes and be on their way off to high performing or, top 25 colleges and universities, or they were low income families living in Ward 7 and 8 that had an opportunity to send their children to a great school in the city. That was what it provided. So a school like this provides, I think, a unique opportunity in that we open up more options and opportunities to a variety of families in the city to put their children in an excellent school, one that will raise the ceiling on what's expected for them, one that will provide the support for them to excel in high school on trajectory toward college and successful careers. And I think that, unfortunately, we provide far too little of that. In my experience in public education, I taught for 8 years and have been involved with organizations like KIPP and Teach for America for the following 10 years, is that we oftentimes miss in public education the simple fact that we've got really great students to work with. We just don't provide them enough great schools. And that's our fundamental failing. If we simply could provide more excellent schools, we'd see much higher performance from many, many more of our students. And that what's breaking down here is not the students. What's breaking down here is our inability to provide these schools that can actually help the students meet their potential. So that's what attracts me to models like this that are proven to work. And not only proven to work, but are proven to work and really pushing students to perform at an exceptionally high level. Because the more we do that, the more that we can erase people's doubts about what low-income children cannot do. And we have to prove it over and over and over again, because one of the unfortunate things about education and education reform is there's an insidious sort of doubt underneath all this that people question whether or not all students can really perform at a really high level. And so we need organizations and schools like this that can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that all students can really achieve at exceptional levels.
Okay, great. We'll come back to some of these themes in a little bit. Rick, when you look around the country, you can find charter schools that are racially and socioeconomically diverse, but there's not a ton of them. And it seems like this hasn't been a big focus of the charter movement. The charter movement has gotten some criticism for that. But what do you think the barriers are? Why haven't we seen more focus in the charter school movement on this particular issue?
Well, Mike, you're absolutely right. Can I just turn it off? There?
Yeah, get real close.
Okay. You're absolutely right that most charter schools are actually more economically and racially isolated than the typical public school. I don't know did everyone get a copy of this pamphlet that we handed out? If you don't have one, Hallie here has extra copies. But if you look on page 11, it's figure 8. It shows the concentrations of poverty in charter schools versus regular public schools, and we find that in 54% of charter schools are majority, or 54% of the students in charter schools are in high poverty environments, where more than 50% of the students are eligible for free and reduced price lunch, compared to about 39% of public schools. And then you have also extreme levels of poverty more common in the charter school sector. 28% of charter schools have more than 3/4 of students from low-income backgrounds, compared to 16% of public schools. So I'm thrilled that BASIS is trying something different and seeking to take a different path than most of these schools. To answer your question, Mike, on one level, this is very understandable, right? Charter school creators are interested in trying to reach the kids who are most in need. So on one level, intuitively, it makes sense that they would locate in the highest poverty neighborhoods so they can kind of get the biggest bang for the buck and reach the most, maximize the number of low-income students that they reach. I think the education research suggests that approach is a mistake, that the research going back 40 years suggests that probably the single best thing you can do for a low-income student is give her a chance to be in an economically mixed school, one where peers are likely to have big dreams and be academically engaged, where you have a core of parents who are actively involved in school affairs, and where you get strong teachers. And we know on average that high poverty schools don't have those things. So I think the BASIS approach of trying to bring kids of different backgrounds together will be far more successful. We're starting to see some schools move in this direction. The Denver School of Science and Technology, High Tech High, some others are beginning to try to consciously create an economically mixed environment. And to my mind, that's kind of the next frontier for charter schools. There have been some disappointments to date with the record of charter schools, in large measure, I think, because they have been all about these 90-90 schools that have high concentrations of poverty and high numbers of students of color. And the research has suggested that, on average, those schools are not going to be as high performing as those that are economically mixed.
Okay, let me get Jeanne into this discussion. Now, we know we don't invite Jeanne Allen to a panel and expect you to agree with everything your fellow panelists have to say. So why don't you go ahead and, first of all, respond a little bit to what Richard was saying about charter schools and these trends. But then, what are there some legitimate policy barriers, maybe funder barriers, that have kept more charter schools from going this route and trying to create this kind of diverse environment?
First, I'm so upset you said that about me, Michael. I only call you Michael when I'm angry.
Yes.
I think actually, is that right? I actually do really just applaud what Rick just said on so many levels. That he really correctly identified the intention of the people in the charter school movement from the very beginning, who sought first and foremost to provide the best most robust education possible to kids who literally are failed on a daily basis in the beginning of the movement and still quite a bit to this day. So I applaud you for that. And our own figures and our anecdotal survey work we do every year really does confirm a lot of the data Rick has about kids tending to be more poor, more minority, and less likely to be creamed in charter schools. And so it's interesting here, not necessarily the biggest devotee of charters has information that most people in that same space tend to reject even today as we're battling out charter schools. So in the interest of brevity, I applaud you for that data. I don't agree and think there's lots of evidence to suggest, however, that on neighborhood, state-by-state regional comparisons, you do tend to find charter schools more integrated than the neighborhood school to which those kids are assigned. And I can throw those out and we can talk about those all day, and I don't think that's my purpose, but I do think we can have an intelligent conversation about that. But I do want to step back a little bit more from this piece. And kind of help us get a grip and a grasp on the bigger issue, which really is, what is it that we're even doing talking about schools at all? What is education really about? It is about trying to help children and people find truly what is the good life. I hearken back to my days as a political philosophy major. Some of you may not have known that. That is the quest of life, the good life. How do you find the good life? Intellect, love, beauty, happiness, community. How do you find those things when you are with a community or with a school or a group of people that are prone to violence, where you're not cared for, where you have no sense of those things, where you can't even begin to proceed to find those things are good, true, and beautiful in life? And frankly, charter schools have been so much about that promise, not even internally, but in sparking at least access to pieces and elements of those over time. So when I first cut my teeth in this business, I met Polly Williams, who was a self-proclaimed Black Panther, African-American Democrat out of Milwaukee, who brought us the nation's first voucher program, who stood up at a forum and said, integration follows education. I fought for 40 years alongside King and others to get integrated schools. And then I came smack dab in the face of the reality that when we tried to integrate schools forcefully, we balkanized our communities. And where you create great schools, integration will follow. I think Basis and so many other people have followed that. Finally, let me just make a comment about gentrification. I feel like I'm having the same conversation I had with Hank Levin almost 20 years ago, Columbia University Teachers College. He's somewhere else now, or related to that in some other capacity. And he looked at me and he said, Jeannie, we will disagree because I just think you believe that most people are going to follow a good sense and want to be with other people of other races and other creeds and things like that, and I just don't think people are that well-intentioned. And so I do tend to think we have a Hobbesian versus Locke, kind of attitude about this. I do think that we can help people find their better angels, and people will connect, and I believe they have. And I believe what this is about is if the Mary Siddalls and the community people in Washington, D.C., in a nicer community than Anacostia, equally as interested and compelling as what Donald Hentz has done at Friendship or what the KIPP folks have done, want to create a school and invite all and do as much as they can, we should applaud and support them for lifting all boats, rather than suggesting that perhaps because they don't have numbers they're following, or perhaps because their skin is a different color, or perhaps a different religion, that they're doing something that inevitably is going to hurt. Frankly, I think we're beyond that, and we have to get over it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeannie. Sam, let's get you into the conversation. You've done a lot of work nationally, but also locally in D.C., and so I'm curious, what's your take on how this is going to play out in the local Washington, D.C. community? What are some of the challenges to creating a school that truly does serve kids from all parts of the city, like Basis wants to do?
Well, thanks, first of all, Mike, again, for setting up this panel so it isn't a series of speeches and that we can try to have a conversation as quickly as possible, and good afternoon to everybody. To build on one of the things that Jeannie said, I see both the good news and the bad news with the possibilities and what we see here. And the good news is, you mentioned the work that I've done nationally. Over the last 10 years, I feel like one of the things that I've been most fortunate to be able to do is to work in a lot of very different communities, from the Deep South to the South Bronx, from Salt Lake City to to the Midwest, elementary, middle, high, public charter, private, you name it, every type of school configuration. And part of an epiphany for me happened when, in working with a lot of those different schools, usually around strategic thinking, I would do some work with their faculty where the first thing I would invite their faculty to do was reflect on their own most powerful learning experience in their life. Didn't matter how old they were, it didn't matter if it was in school or out of school, just a deeply meaningful experience for them where real learning occurred. And then we'd share those stories and mine those personal stories for shared attributes of the ideal learning environment that could be directly applied to enhance that professional learning environment. It's a pretty obvious thing, right? I mean, let's start with what we know to be true about powerful learning, and then let's use that list to tune our own school, celebrate the things we're already doing, and become more proactive to take care of the areas where we may be falling short. And one of the things that I observed over time was that regardless of what community I was working in, whether it was high poverty or low poverty, whether it was elementary or high school, the list that was generated by very diverse and eclectic groups of people was always the exact same list. The phrasing may have changed a little bit, but in a way it's obvious, and yet for me, having the experience of seeing it in different communities, it was, and Jeanne spoke to this too, what we as human beings need for powerful learning to occur are the same things. And so there's a lot of different ways you could put it. I love Jeanne's list, what these stories revealed, and I've been gathering stories from people across the country for the past 2 years. The most common attributes of the ideal learning environment: it's challenging, it's engaging, it's relevant, meaning the learning is relevant as the learner defines it, it's supportive, and it's experiential. And so one of the things that's exciting about schools like DC is they're, I think, beginning, Basis DC, is they're beginning with that question: how do we create a learning environment that is challenging, engaging, relevant, supportive, and experiential? So the good news is we know more than we think we do, and there are already a lot of schools that are doing it. The bad news, potentially, when you think about Mike's question about racial politics, is that if we're not careful, and you see I'm the former chair of a charter school that's set to open in September, I think the opportunity to create more choice and variety in the school system is a great idea. I believe in the potential power of co-opetition. If we're not careful, what we could end up helping to create is an apartheid system of schooling with one method of instruction for the poor and one method for the privileged. And so the opportunity that I think schools like this provide is to think creatively about how to self-regulate the extent to which they create the optimal conditions for a really rich, diverse community of students. Rick mentioned High Tech High. I was just in San Diego, and one of the ways that they do it is they have a zip code lottery. So they get great diversity through zip code in all of those different places. So if folks want to opt in to a longer commute, it's their choice. And to me, I think that's the promise that schools like this can have in DC, and it's certainly where I hope our movement towards greater school choice will deliver us to.
Okay, great. Boy, lots of different strings to pull on. So let me get started on a few of them. I heard Sekou talk about Wilson providing an opportunity for excellence for everyone. We've heard a lot from everybody about challenge, about making sure. So let's talk about the logistics. Let's say that the school is meant to open in a 5th grade. Is that right? So incoming 5th graders. In DC, if you look on NAEP data or anything else, you see huge gaps in terms of where the lowest performing kids are versus the highest achieving kids are. That tracks, unfortunately, to a large degree with race and class. Not entirely, thankfully, but to a large degree. So if you have a school that's going to push kids to these very rigorous levels, how do you make sure that it does not leave behind the kids that are coming in who are several grade levels below, who are more likely to be children of color or low-income children? How do schools manage that challenge while at the same time, the kids who are ready for that challenge right away, that they get that challenge? How do you do that? Are we talking about tracking within the school? What happens?
We'll start with the last be first, since
yes.
So much conversation about last and first in the education circle.
Absolutely.
I would say 2 things, and I'm really curious to hear what others think. The first, and this is a key for the founders of this school and anybody else that's associated with starting a school, to what do you owe your ultimate fidelity? Is it to the classes, or is it to meeting your students where they are and then figuring out how to push as hard as possible so that they can develop the skills required to unleash their full potential on the world? That is not the same thing. So I have seen schools that maintain their ultimate fidelity to AP classes and end up setting kids up to fail because they haven't been given the foundation they need. And I think, again, to me, the fidelity is to the extent to which we create an environment that is challenging, engaging, relevant, supportive, and experiential, in which case AP classes are probably a part of it, but may or may not be the be-all and end-all. The other thing I would say is the lesson from the business community, location, location, location. If what we really seek is a school that has the greatest opportunity to pull on the greatest number of communities, it probably makes sense that it's neither in Anacostia nor Woodley Park. So if it's possible to find a space that's truly centrally located, that's easily accessible by public transportation, I think then you create the greatest likelihood that the school is truly on neutral ground, and you'll get kids from all spots.
I think there's a huge disconnect between your question and really, again, sort of best practices in every other industry. What you're suggesting sounds to me a little like social engineering, the kind of social engineering that had Kansas City, frankly, in the worst kind of performance possible for about 25 years following Judge Clark's decision to integrate it, spending $25,000 per kids, giving them swimming pools, beautiful buildings, to find, oh, guess what, we really didn't educate those kids at all, because they started out by saying, how do we make sure we meet these kids? How do we make sure they're all together? How do we do that? It'd be like saying to you, Mike, you were talking about you moving, finding a better community. We don't want you on that street because there's not enough, you're Italian, there's not enough Jews, and there's not enough blacks, and something like that. I mean, we really are covering a slippery slope. Great enterprises, great successful enterprises across the world, including politics sometimes, really does follow great leaders. When we set up great leaders, support great leaders, give them performance contracts to abide, and tell them, go ahead, create a great school. We will support you with our tax dollars. We will hold you accountable, and then make sure that they encourage people around them. You get exactly what you want without engineering. And I've been to the 14th and U area. I know generally where Mary's talking about being. I've hung around there in the evening, and guess what? I'm one of the only white faces there on a Friday night at about 2 o'clock in the morning. My husband and I are closing up shop. At the same time, it's probably one of the most diverse restaurants I've been to when I went out to lunch with her. This is not like, it just so pains me that they're having conversations and people are going, oh, it's all those white parents taking all those other kids because they don't want to be in the local neighborhood schools. Flash, those white parents all left, went to the suburbs, or have their kids in schools like mine are in right now.
Okay. All right. So let me get I want to come back to some of these things. Let me get back to, I want to hit on this question, the instructional question some more, because I know Rick's written about this, Sekou. I'm very interested from your experience at KIPP. I know that there was a debate in Baltimore recently, I think it might still be going on, where KIPP in Baltimore was having kids take a placement exam when they came in, and then placing them either in a 5th grade class, or it was a 6th grade class or a 5th grade class, depending on where they were. I mean, how does a school manage this kind of academic diversity?
Yeah, well, I think the interesting thing about this question is this is not rocket science. This is like basic teaching 101, right? So I taught elementary school for 8 years. Beginning of every year, you absolutely figure out where every single child in the class is. And you know what your end goal for all of them, collectively and individually, is. And then you have to relentlessly work with them individually and collectively to make sure they're on trajectory to get to your end goal. Now, that clearly means that you're going to have students who, if they come in really far behind, their trajectory to success for your goal that year is much steeper. You have to at some point confront the reality that a 5th grader walking in with 3rd grade reading skills may not exit that year as where you want a 6th grader. So you've got to ask some hard questions, like, is the goal for this child to be at what point at the end of this year? How do we make sure we support them and provide the type of instruction that gets them to that goal? And then how do you get them to the end goal? Because once again, and this is where schools tend to fall down, that this is a marathon and not a sprint. But unfortunately, we've got teachers in this sort of nonstop wheel of, if I just run as fast as I can with this child this year and then hand them off to somebody else, and we're running this series of relay races, only the baton just keeps getting dropped over and over again. Because instead of as a group saying, we know what our end goal for our seniors is and we know how we have to break that down over its component parts over 7 years, we can get there. And this is the part of where we have to be smarter in school than we traditionally have been. We're going to bring in whatever students come in the door. I mean, my wife's a pediatrician, and one of the things that we have talked about over the years is we serve the same clientele, and it's whoever walks in the door. You don't get to pick and choose. You know, the fact that a 5th grader walks in at or above grade level, or, you know, that's who they are. But what teachers do is meet students where they are and then provide the leadership and instruction to take them where you want them to go. Now, that means every classroom I've ever taught had a range of students that were all over the place. And you have to own responsibility for that. And I think that's what great teachers and what great schools do. They own responsibility for the success of all their students, and what the individual students are accomplishing in a given year and a given day may look very different, but it's still on trajectory to the same end goal for all of them.
Is it appropriate, do you think, ever to have some kind of a grouping so that, you know, kids who are way below can get some intensive remediation help before they're back in the regular classrooms? I mean, it sounds like a lot to ask teachers to be able to meet kids that might be 3, 4, 5 grade levels apart.
Right. But I think the thing to keep in mind is schools, and this is where we fall down, right? Schools have to focus on meeting the needs of children. So, yes, it's a lot to ask teachers, but if teachers don't want to do it, then we'll get teachers who do. I mean, this is, you know, the thing that frustrates me about these kind of issues is we back into what we're willing to give children instead of asking the question, what do they need and what does it take from us to provide it for them? If we approach the problem that way, then we're much more likely to meet their needs. But if we start from the basic premise that, well, if I ask teachers to, you know, diversify their lessons or group children accordingly, that's a lot to ask them. Well, yes, it's a lot to ask them. But it just so happens that many of the children are facing much bigger problems in their life if we don't give them what they actually need. So, yeah, I mean, you have to, you know, break down instructional groups. I mean, I taught 3rd grade where I had 6 to 7 different reading groups. It would be a lot easier to have one and read the same book with everybody. It just happens to not work. So we have to actually provide the type of instruction that will work for them. And when we do that, they are successful. And, you know, it also creates a type of momentum within the classroom, because if you've got groups of children reading at different levels, experiencing success every single day, the culture of the classroom of the school changed dramatically, because everybody walks in every day under the expectation that today I'm going to learn something that I didn't know, and tomorrow I'll come back and learn something else. But if you frustrate children by instructing them below or above where they are, it actually has the opposite effect, because they feel like they're walking to school every day and it's not particularly good use of their time. So yes, it's a lot to ask, but it's what we need to provide if we want our children to be successful in school.
Mm-hmm. And Rick, you've written some about this. You've gotten in trouble with some of your friends on the left for saying that if you're going to have diverse schools, you're going to need to probably do some ability grouping, maybe even some tracking to some degree. You want to comment on that?
Well, I think you have to seek this in move forward in a sensible and logical way rather than an ideological way on this question. So I'm very committed to the idea of bringing kids of all different backgrounds together, different economic groups, so that everyone will do better. Once you have a school that's economically integrated, you may have differing levels of manifest ability, not innate ability, but manifest ability. And there, I think it's appropriate in certain, certainly in the later grades, to have some differentiation in the classes. You want to have, though, you want to make sure that to the extent that there is ability grouping, that there's fluidity, so that kids who start to catch up can move up to a higher group. You want to make sure that certain classes are not tracked. So you have a civics class, it would be obscene to track that. Whereas if you have a calculus class, maybe that makes some more sense to. So I think one has to be sensible and not ideological in pursuing this. The other thing I'd mention, and Mike, you and I have talked about this, but there's research going back several years talking about the concept of cooperative learning that I think is very important. That is to say, if you have a particular concept that students are trying to learn, in some ways it's advantageous to have a group that is heterogeneous in terms of ability, and that the kids who are further ahead are involved in essentially helping to teach a concept to someone who's further behind. Now, right away, people will say, if their kid is a little more advanced, that's the last thing I want them doing. But anyone who's actually taught in a classroom will know that the process of teaching someone else, explaining a concept, requires a much deeper level of understanding than simply taking in information. And so the research on the cooperative learning idea has suggested that it can be a win-win situation. Can I say something quickly about Jeannie's comment on Kansas City, though? Because I actually agree with her on this point, that Kansas City is an example of where spending lots of extra money on some high schools in order to attract a mix of students was unsuccessful. But it was unsuccessful mostly because the magnet schools in Kansas City didn't attract middle-class kids. So it wasn't a failure of integration. It was a failure to attract the kids. And in lots of communities like Cambridge and elsewhere, the school officials are smarter about how to create integration, and they seek to poll parents and find out, well, what is it that would take to get your kids to come to a school in a tougher part of town, and then create demand in that way. I was at a school in Hartford that's in a very distressed neighborhood with houses boarded up nearby, and there was a long waiting list of white middle-class families who wanted to go into this school because it had a Montessori teaching approach. So intelligently done, I think that these integration programs can work very well.
Can I make a comment also about this? Just something that I think both Sekou, Sam, and just now Rick really alluded to, and not alluded to, directly hit on the head, which is central to this entire issue, which is the mastery of a subject that a teacher has. A truly great teacher that truly understands his or her knowledge, who understands the subject they're teaching, can take a child from any point and take them to the next level. They know how to communicate it because they understand it and they're passionate about it. And at the root of all of this stuff, no surprise to you, Mike, or anyone else in this room, is the teacher quality issue. I was in Pennsylvania yesterday at a huge rally for school choice, not only an incredible rainbow of people from all over the state, Philadelphia to suburban, wanting more choices, more charters, more scholarships, vouchers, you name it. By the way, supported by an incredibly robust bipartisan group of people. But every one of them I spoke to, as is the case every time we go out and speak to folks in the community, which we do a lot, say the same thing. Oh, there's someone down the street, they said so-and-so has a great teacher. Oh, there's a great school, they really helped so-and-so get to the next level. Parents who are the poorest parents, who have the least advantages of all, know, regardless of their poverty or their position or their race, where great education is happening. It is unbelievable. They don't have to be on the web. They see it, they get it, they follow the uniforms, they see what the kids are like, and they hear their cousins and the people in stores, and they hear, by the way, the wealthier, often white people talking about it too. So you give them great schools, and frankly, you know, I hate to bring it up, Mike, but the big elephant in the room is not desegregation or integration, it's unions, because that's what is preventing us from getting high-quality teachers everywhere.
Okay. All right. So I wanted, Jeannie, you're great on panels because you keep throwing good provocative things out there that we can come back to. This is great. I'm making a list. All right. Let's get back to the issue you raised a few minutes ago. And this is a key question. There's the concern. There's this paradox, right? Charter schools get blamed by some on the left for not being diverse enough, right? By having, especially what that really means is that they're largely minority, high poverty kids. On the other hand, there's plenty of people on the left who would kill charter schools if they were set up to mostly serve white or white upper middle class kids. That this would feel like this is creating a private school with a public subsidy, right? So you sort of can't win. There's this question in D.C., you know, with scarce dollars and all of this, is there a place for a school that's going to serve plenty of white kids, plenty of upper middle class kids, you know, or should the focus in DC charter schools be mostly on the kids that are still most poorly served by the current system? I'd be really curious about this from Rick or from Sam. I mean, how does this issue play out? This question of, you know, this is just going to be an alternative so that those wealthy parents don't have to send their kids to private schools and have taxpayers pay for it instead.
Well, so the way you posed it, Mike, is, you know, the left will be angry if these are high poverty, high minority schools, or if they are mostly white advantaged schools, and therefore you can't win. Well, the way you can win is to have an integrated school, right? I mean, that's what would satisfy people like me, and it sounds like that's what DC Basis is, or Basis DC is all about. So to my mind, that's the answer, and we have examples here in DC, the E.L. Haynes School, the Capital City School. I mean, it's been done. It's not as if it's impossible to create economically and racially diverse schools. So that's the way to win.
I don't have exhaustive information, although real quick responding to Rick's, I know that there's been a challenge at Haynes as they've evolved over time that they feel their student and family population has become less diverse. And that in some respects, at least using Haynes as a singular case study, one of the challenges has been to maintain their initial more kind of full integrated community as the word has gotten out about their success. I know that there's 4 new schools that are set to, charter schools that are set to open this fall, and at least 2 of them, the Inspired Teaching School and Mundo Verde, are very proactively seeking integrated student bodies. I think what all 3 of those communities speak to, though, is there's intention is one thing and is important, and then trying to think through more intelligently how to create the greatest likelihood that it occurs in a spirit that's truly opt-in, and that's primarily designed to create a richer, more intellectually vibrant community for kids, is another. And that's the area where we're still, I think, starting just in the earliest stages of starting to figure out how to do that well.
Well, and look, the charter movement's already on a slippery slope to more heavily regulated environments that supposedly respond to someone's need or someone's new rule, and it's already becoming a little bit like the charter blob in some cases. And so what you're also talking about is, are we going to start forcing or requiring certain kinds of people, certain kind of places, as opposed to recognizing that community schools also have a role to play. Kids who want to play with kids after school, particularly when they have working parents, can't drive somewhere, can't get on the bus alone. Communities do, in fact, foster more community. And again, if you start with education as opposed to starting with the, albeit noble goal of integration, you will get a better society. You will get more people with higher incomes moving to areas, raising tax bases, making the world, sorry to sound like Stevie Wonder, a better place.
Hey, I'm going to, by the way, if you want to sing that would be great. All right. We're going to get the audience in here soon. Do we have a microphone that we can get going? One point on this question, though, Jeannie, is, there's one thing about regulation. There's another case of deregulation. I mean, right now, if you are a charter school anywhere in the country and you want to access the federal startup funds, you have to run a blind lottery. I mean, it has to be whoever enters and you just pull the names. You cannot, for example, have a lottery system where there's a certain number of slots for poor kids, another certain number of slots for non-poor kids. Or even the high-tech high example where they have a zip code-based lottery, knowing that the zip codes are largely broken up by race and class. Because they do that, they don't access federal startup dollars.
Well, and the other thing Rick pointed to also is sort of the devil's bargain that many legislators had to have when they were debating their charter laws. I mean, it wasn't explicit in it's explicit in North Carolina that your school has to mirror the racial balance of the local community. Well, guess what? That means that there's a bunch of schools like Healthy Start that are 90% minority. That's what they are. And so there's a little bit of a don't do it, because if you do it anywhere else, you're going to have all this mass exodus.
Well, I also think an important thing to consider here is, and Sam pointed this out, part of the problem is like success actually creates this problem, right? So oftentimes with charters in the district, it has been that you've started with somewhat more diverse and in particular somewhat more representative low-income communities. But as the school has proven the outcomes people have wanted to see, what you get is an onslaught of parents of all backgrounds applying into the lottery. And now it just becomes a numbers game, right? It's just simply the number of people that put their names in, then you have less control over who's going to come to the school because, let's be honest, the District of Columbia is a tough place to live. It's extremely expensive. As more affluent parents find more options, because that's what we've created, more options for people. So they're going to avail themselves of free, high-quality options. And that, unfortunately, makes it less likely that low-income parents that want those options as well will get them, because on the front end, when the schools first open, they're the ones most likely to take the risk of getting a school that's better than one they have access to in their neighborhood. But as the school proves that it's worth what in it, then the results are real, you begin going the other direction. I mean, the real way to solve this problem is to just provide high quality options for everyone. So now people are simply picking. I mean, this is our problem in DC right now is people are actually choosing, right? And so imagine this as a parent. People are fundamentally choosing between a good school and a bad school. Now, I've been a parent. I've got 2 boys, a 10 and a 6-year-old. Never in my life would I choose a bad school over a good school. Never. It doesn't matter where the school is located. So that's the way most people feel. So given those options, you don't really have a real choice. So the way we create real choice in the city and any other community is the options people have to choose from are all good. And we're really talking about programmatic differences. But we haven't evolved to that point in the district. So as a result, once people realize that the option is good, they're opting out of schools that are not good for schools that are good. So the only way we change that dynamic so that we can get to a place where they're going to be much more diverse by choice is that we have more good options.
And, this isn't just happening in the charter school space, of course. I mean, there are relatively very few DC kids who are going to their in-boundary school these days. I mean, something like maybe 20% out of all kids in DC go to their in-boundary school. Vast majority of DCPS kids are choosing out-of-boundary schools. But some of those schools, say on Capitol Hill or in Columbia Heights, were schools that for a long time poor minority kids from out-of-boundary were coming into. And now as more middle-class, upper-middle-class in-boundary parents are choosing them, they're pushing them out as they have the lottery. I mean, how is this going to... I mean, it just strikes me as a political challenge going forward. I mean, how is this going to play out? Could you tell us a little bit about the council? I mean, how do you manage the politics of this as we right now have this scarce resource of, quote, good schools and charters or DCPS? And there's this sense that because of the lottery system, it's the numbers game that you're getting some low-income families getting pushed out of schools that they've been sending their kids to for a long time.
Right. So for perspective, when I was growing up, my parents went out and looked at several DCPS schools and went and met principals and looked at schools that had seats. And they had principals calling them to get them to enroll me in their school because there were so many seats available. And the principals were basically looking at their budgets, realizing if we don't up our enrollment, we'll have to start slashing teachers, right? So the thing is, over the last 30 years, the dynamic has shifted significantly because as the population has been growing, as we're becoming more diverse, and adding more, working families to the district, now the supply doesn't meet the demand. So you've got many, many more families that value and are looking for really good schools, but we've not been able to keep up the pace of the number of good schools that are available. And that's what's created our problem. So how do we fix this? We have to accelerate the rate at which we're adding high-quality seats in schools for families. Because right now, I mean, I talked to friends in the last couple of weeks who applied to out-of-boundary lottery to 6 different schools, and have found that the best number they got was like number 72 on the waiting list. I mean, that's a function of there not being enough seats out there for families. And once again, it gets back to we're not providing enough quality options for parents. So parents are simply picking unfortunately, they're picking amongst the options that are not even available to them. Right? They live in a neighborhood where there's not a good school. They go out the lottery and DCPS plus charters, and they still don't get into a slot. We have to rapidly accelerate the number of good schools, and I think that's why I'm here, right? Mary came to me months ago to talk about BASIS and, knows me to be someone who has worked aggressively to expand the quality available in schools. I mean, when I worked for KIPP, I spent a year working in the heart of Ward 7 where they were very averse to charter schools to help them support us moving a school to their neighborhood, because what we realized is the majority of students we were serving were coming out of Ward 7 and 8. So why have them travel an hour every day across town? Why not bring the school to their community? And we have to do more of that. We have to provide more good schools. We've got to do it quickly, because if we don't, the trend of the population is going to push more and more low-income families out of having access to anything looking like a quality school. And that's my real concern that we'll have.
Rick, I mean, is there an argument for some kind of controlled choice program in D.C.?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, the gentrification presents political challenges, but it's also an enormous opportunity. I mean, the research suggests that low-income kids who have the opportunity to go to economically mixed schools are 2 years ahead on the National Assessment National Assessment of Educational Progress of low-income students who are in high-poverty schools. This is something that the influx of middle-class families of whatever race into the public school system in D.C. is a positive thing for all students if it's managed properly. And that comes back to your question about the lottery. I mean, to have a blind lottery, to my mind, makes no sense. When we know that an economically mixed school will produce far superior results for all students in the school, then we ought to have that as a conscious goal, as the Denver School of Science and Technology and other schools do. You lose federal funding though if you have a weighted lottery, and to me that's a nonsensical policy.
And I think that kind of thing could be changed by smart folks who are willing to work on it. But at the same time, I guess where I object is that we have to make a conscious effort to pull people together, conscious meaning legal, regulatory. If we add to this mix of discussing charter schools the full portfolio of choices available and look at some of the countries that Bob's work has studied, more choices bring together more kids. If you look at even some of the elite private schools in this area, some of our kids are going to them, and they're actually with black and brown kids for the first time in their lives because parents are opting in and they're funded by scholarships. So, to add to this portfolio, I apologize, Mike, the DC Scholarship Program has put black and brown kids in schools that they never would have been to, and if you look around the country, you see the same thing over and over again. Charters and other choices. True equity. Our kids with money on their backs going to different schools together. Happens when you are not restricted by neighborhood or class. People will come together.
And just to underscore one point that I assume is also a part of what Sekou was talking about, unquestionably we have a supply and demand problem. We need more great schools. And it is not that those great schools must only come through new charters. The spirit of coopetition, ideally, is that any school, whether it's, initially you said our charter is uniquely positioned to take advantage of this. I think charters have created the space, and now all schools can take advantage of it. There's nothing stopping plain old public schools from trying to get people from all over the city. And hopefully this space will get all of the, not only charter schools in my neighborhood of Columbia Heights, but the public schools that have been there for a while, to create more viable options and to reflect the demand of the people that do live in Boundary. And then it really is up to each family. Do I want to just send my kid to the great school that's 2 blocks away, or do I want to send them to the great school that's a bus across town? It's up to me to decide.
Okay, let's get the audience in here. Mary's got the microphone. Got a question over here. Please tell us who you are and ask a question. This is always the Washington, D.C. panel requirement here. And a question is not a speech with a question mark at the end. Yes. I'm talking to you, Graham. That's
Hello?
Yes.
So I have a question.
Oh, so tell us who you are. And,
I'm Rachel Venezia with the Cato Institute Center for Educational Freedom. I have a question more probably for Mary Siddall. I'm curious as to how the basis school is going to achieve its diversity. Will there be a quota system, a weighted lottery, any sort of
aggressive marketing and outreach, which we've already done and are doing and will continue to do.
Right. So they'll be right. So no waiting in the lottery. You'll be hoping for federal startup funds, I assume. Yeah. So and then right. You locate it in a central place, and then you make sure that there's good marketing in all parts of the city. Right.
Yeah, and can I speak to that real quickly? Because we had this issue when I was doing community outreach for KIPP, right? So we had a school that was located on 8th and M Street by the Navy Yard, and we were proposing to move it into Benning Road in the heart of Ward 7. And many of the residents rightly asked, our neighborhood is going to absorb the impact of having a school here, but we're not guaranteed the benefits of our children being enrolled. And they're absolutely right. Because of the lottery system, they're actually not guaranteed. And so their concern was, well, why should we take the school in our neighborhood when we can't be guaranteed that our students will be enrolled here? I said, well, we can control that this way, because charter schools essentially are out actually marketing and recruiting students. We could guarantee them that we would target our recruitment and outreach efforts to their neighborhood. We would simply leave it on anyone else who did not live in Ward 7 to find out where we were and come and seek us out. But other than that, our energy we put into reaching out to students in that neighborhood. the other practical reality is, in this District of Columbia today, the migration pattern to school every morning is from east to west. People, I would say no one. There's very little movement in the morning for students moving east across the city to go to school. So where you actually place the building has a lot to do with who you're likely to attract. But you also, with new schools, you have a unique opportunity to do the outreach, to target the communities and the students that you would want to have in the building, and you go to them, and you make the pitch to them, and that's oftentimes who you're going to get.
Very interesting. Okay, who's got another question? Oh, good.
Hi, I'm Beverly Paul. I'm the parent of 2 DCPS kids. We migrate every morning, east to west. And the oldest of them is a 5th grader, and I'm here because I'm seriously hoping for additional options for high school. But my question is a little bit different, and it is, I understand that BASIS will be an open lottery. But what I heard the kids talking about in the movie was about wanting to succeed, and the only way to be successful is how hard you have to work. And I'm wondering, if you just take the kids through the open lottery, you're going to get a lot of kids who don't have that mindset. And what are you going to do about it?
Maybe this is another one for you, Sekou. KIPP, you could argue, has very much the same model, which is they demand that kids work hard.
And it's a completely open lottery. I think one of the things we underestimate is the degree to which students, parents, and teachers and/or schools are willing to do a lot when there's real clarity about the expectations and how we're going to be held accountable. I think about, at KIPP, we would meet with every single parent and student at their home to go through essentially the choice and commitment elements of the school. So people were clear on how long the school day was, what homework was like, what a school day was like. So we were all on the same page, and we were also clear about how we're going to hold each other accountable. In my experience, most students will do a lot more if they know you're going to do the same amount that you're going to ask them to do. So if I tell them you're going to be in school for 9 hours a day, and I'm going to give you 2 hours of homework, but here are all the things I'm going to do to support you, and if you do your part, I'll do mine, the end outcome and the goal will be met. I think the reason people fall down is they don't believe that they're going to reach the end outcome, and in part because look around the city. We have fundamentally failed to meet students' needs and to provide them a quality school, and yet they've heard every year. I've met with adults that graduate from DC public schools that are functionally illiterate. Now, I'm not talking about someone who left school. I'm talking about somebody who graduated, which means for at least 12 years they were told some version of, congratulations, you did what you're supposed to do, you're going on to the next grade. And yet they exit the door without the basic skills they need to be successful in life. That's what we've done. Now, if we commit to providing the resources for you to be successful, yes, we're going to make you work very hard, but we're going to work hard also. It's about creating a culture in a school. And in most schools I've seen that are successful, you create the culture and everybody gets in line along with it. Or people choose to go somewhere else. And that's part of the choice system of these school lotteries anyway. People are opting into, ideally, the schools they want to be in.
Just to comment on the culture also, Beverly, colleague of mine, Casey Carter, who did the first No Excuses, did a book for us on purpose, stories of 12 schools with great school cultures. And really, at the end of the day, you wouldn't like me saying this, but really all it's about is what you expect. And it's about the brain. We do know from brain science a lot more than we used to know. And what are we using? Some minuscule portion of our brain? Kids change. Adults change. It's what you do. How many of us work with people who have had a sea change because something happened, a new boss, or maybe they left and they found themselves later? Our kids do it too. My kids used to be really hardworking. They're older now. Not so much. I'm hoping it comes back around. But, it's what we do when we put ourselves in front of them 8 hours a day. And I really think that at the bottom of it, the root, what Sam did, what the KIPP folks did, and Sekou and others, is really about training and order. And that's what a BASIS clearly does. Those kids weren't born working hard. I bet you if you talk to their parents, many of them are shocked. Now, again, I hear that from an awful lot of disadvantaged parents on a daily basis. I had no idea she could do this. Oh, my God, my son is a rocket science. He used to be so lazy. I was scared. I thought he'd go to jail. The stories are endless, and I realize it's anecdotal, Rick, and we're researchers. With all due respect, that's probably not the best way to have discussion, but it's true, and we see it over and over and again. Successful schools make kids work hard.
Okay, next question. We're going to make you work hard here, Mary.
I have a question for Sekou. When is the special election?
Yeah, April 26th. So make sure that you set some time aside on April 26th. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. However, I am going to tell you that one of the candidates I know who I found to be a very compelling, committed public servant that I think fairly highly of. He happens to be here, and his name is Sekou Biddle. Yeah, but it's, I think, an important opportunity for us to continue to support work like this in the city. I think that one of the challenges, and back to the how do we provide more options. Sam's absolutely right. Like, people have forgotten for some reason that part of the essence of the charter movement in the District of Columbia was that we would create space for innovation, and at some point we would find things that work, we would bring them to life, and then we would scale them. So we've done the first part. We've got a number of things that are proven to work. I think that BASIS provides another opportunity for a program that can come to the city that can work and serve children. But for us to really hit the tipping point where we get fundamental change around public education, we're going to have to lean on our public school system to begin adopting and scaling all the things that work. Because I ran for the Board of Education back in 2007, and the primary reason I ran was I was looking at the work that I was doing at KIPP then, and that school had been open for about 10 years. So it was the highest performing public middle school in the entire city. There's not a shred of evidence that DC public schools had made any effort whatsoever to simply take what they were doing and do it themselves. I mean, some of this is not rocket science, right? In any other industry, if a competitor were to set up shop in your community and start outperforming you significantly, you would eventually figure out, I have to do what they're doing or do it better, or I won't be in business anymore. And that's been where we've really fallen down, is that there are a number of schools and programs around the city. I was at Two Rivers Public Charter School this morning, which is an exceptional public charter school. But once again, there's no evidence that the system has adapted and said, well, why don't we just go study what they're doing and then begin to do it ourselves, so that you begin to have 15, 25 charter schools that are successful in the city, and the city simply replicates each of those models once. We can double the number of options, because part of it is programmatic in terms of what parents and families want, and the other part of it is quality. We can do both. We just have not been smart enough, and we've lacked the political will to do it. And that's what's holding us back.
I just want to get in here for the videotape that the Thomas B. Fordham Institute is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse any candidates. We do endorse voting, though. We can do that. We can say
can
that,
I ask you a question?
Yes.
Given what
There, Jeannie, I need
to ask a question, but it's
Yes.
about the charter law in D.C., which, as you know, is the second, I think, leading. Is the best number one. Sorry, Jonathan. It is a number one. The charter board and the institutions have been very robust and independent, as well as highly accountable. Mm-hmm. But is there a problem brewing when they begin to maybe informally, not so much publicly, but sounds like informally, gentrify themselves where they think schools should crop up? There's been a lot of feedback over the last couple of years of them telling applicants, well, unless you're in this ward, we don't want to hear from you. If you're an outside school, don't apply. Very parochial. What do we do about something like that? Is that a natural course, or is that just people getting comfortable?
Right. Oh, that's a good question. This is the first time I thought about it. I mean, I think, I think that it's reasonable for a public body that they are to be able to look around the city and say, look, we have some priorities, because there's still some parts of the city that are not well served by public charter schools or by traditional public schools. I think that's legitimate. I don't know if that's what they're doing. If there's some places in Ward 7 or 8 where there's still a desert in terms of high quality school options, I think that's totally legitimate for them to encourage applications from schools willing to set up shop in those neighborhoods. This larger question is the one that I think Rick's been writing about, and that's the idea of a controlled choice system. And that's to say, should it be completely wide open, or is it okay to have, let's say, the magic word of a nudge to try to nudge the system towards making diverse schools more likely? And I think my own read on this is that I think that there should be choices within the system that include diverse schools, and that there is some evidence from other cities that if you don't have some kind of structures in place to allow that, it's very hard to keep and create and maintain those choices. I mean, you have schools in DC today, DCPS schools, where you have schools that all the third graders are black and all the preschoolers are white. And what's likely to happen is that those schools are going to be flipped in a matter of a couple of years, from going to all black to all white. Now, in my view, that's a huge lost opportunity. That, if we could figure out some smart, thoughtful ways to create schools that were diverse and maintain their diversity, that would be a good thing, because there's lots of parents, white and black, who want that. But that's going to mean doing things like, having weighting in the lotteries, or some kind of controlled choice system like that. So look, maybe that's social engineering, but I think that if you want to provide those choices of diversity, you might have to provide some social engineering to make it happen.
A related point, and if Robert Kane of Focus were here, I know he would say this. Robert has in effect kind of declared war on the public charter school board. And one of the things that's really interesting in D.C. is if you look at the nation, when it comes to choice, we're pretty much the most mature market for choice that exists. Which is not to say we have any idea what we're doing yet, but we are actually, we're at the tip of the spear. And one of the points that Robert makes, or certainly what he feels, is that over time, these are Robert's ideas, I'm going to remain agnostic. Over time, the public charter school board has encroached upon the original spirit of the charter school movement, which was a pretty robust, unregulated choice space, by imposing greater and greater requirements and limitations upon the creativity and the decision-making of founding charter school groups. So in addition to the other points that you raised, one of the things that I'm very interested to keep observing in this maturing market for choice, to see how that issue gets resolved over time, or not.
Mike, can I jump in? And sure. I just want to respond to something that Sekou said before. So the notion is that the public schools ought to learn from what the charter schools are doing. And certainly when Al Shanker first proposed charter schools, that was the idea. They were supposed to be models. But one thing that bothers me is that, the KIPP schools are dealing with a very different set of circumstances for all the reasons you were outlining. There's a self-selected group of parents. Lots of kids leave the school. Very few kids come in. And the one time that KIPP tried to take over a regular public school, play by the same set of rules that public schools do, that is, you just have kids come in, you have to take them. There's no self-selection. They failed miserably, and they got out of the business, and they said, we're never going to do this again. So I agree. There's lots that the public schools can learn from KIPP. I like the idea of the extended learning, the extended day, the high expectations. All those things can be transferred. But until KIPP takes over a regular public school, or better yet, a regular public school district, I think we can't make we can't make the lessons transfer completely.
Okay, we're not going to have the big KIPP debate today, because that would take too long. Mr. Graham down. Oh, we've got a question up here, and then Graham after that.
I'm Eve Brooks. I've worked with the charter school movement, but I'm also engaged in Southwest DC. And what we're seeing is an issue around transportation, because everyone who can afford it and is middle class is moving their kids out. And all that we have in our school are the lowest income children. So I think we need to look at that role, and I'm really pleased that Sekou has started to look at the role of transportation and the fact that it is not 100% subsidized in a city which is 70% choice. Everyone's moving out. If you really want that equality of opportunity, the poorest kids need to be able to move as well as the richest.
Okay, great. Mary, we've got a question from Graham up front.
This question's a bit adjunct and not on this theme at all, but I must ask, why is it that this panel and the group here spend the entire afternoon talking about who's going to be at the school, and no discussion that I've heard about what goes on inside the school?
Okay. Graham would like to hear more about what's going on inside the school. Well, can anybody...
my oversight, I think I took it for granted that we wouldn't be talking about a grade school unless there was actually some really cool stuff going on in it. But there is, and the point is we should try to get it here because it is. So, but Graham's got a great point.
Yeah, Rick?
Yeah, well, the reason that I care about where the kids are coming from is that 4 decades of research suggests that the makeup of the school drives precisely what happens in the school. So the kind of teacher you're going to be able to attract, the quality of teachers based on the socioeconomic status of the school. It's directly related. I mean, and in DC, that's definitely true. I mean, Michelle Rhee's impact program suggests that the teachers who are making the biggest gains are in the most affluent schools, not in the high poverty schools.
No, certainly there are charter schools in DC that are high poverty that have attracted great teachers. So there are exceptions to that rule.
Because they're playing with by a different set of rules, right? Because you're not getting great teachers in schools where they have to accept all the kids in a poor neighborhood. That's not happening. Likewise, the peer influences are very powerful. Any parent knows that, and the research backs it up, that kids are learning from one another in the classroom, and that it matters whether your classmates are expecting to go on to college, have that aspiration, whether they are academically engaged, whether they're cutting class, whether they're creating disorder. There are all sorts of things that are related to the socioeconomic status of your classmates and affect what goes on in the school. And the final piece is the parents. And there's a wide body of research that suggests that having an active group of parents in a school transforms that school. And for a variety of reasons, middle-class parents, on average, are much more likely to be involved in school affairs. They don't, if they have one job and don't, they have a car to get to school, then it's understandable that there are higher levels of parental involvement. For example, middle-class parents are 4 times as likely to be members of the PTA. So, and then if you look at curriculum, that's directly associated with the socioeconomic status of the kids in the school.
I just think that makes lower-income parents much smarter than middle-class parents if they don't join the PTA, frankly, because the PTA does absolutely nothing to advocate. And, Richard, I just have to say, 4 decades of research, your interpretation of 4 decades of research might suggest that who's there has everything to do with what goes on. The reality is who's there has everything to do with the constraints and the rules that require principals to have to hire people based not at all on quality, but based on credentials, to keep people regardless if they do well. So what you have, as the Education Trust has pointed out, is 4 decades of teachers with no qualifications being placed closest to kids who are most poor, being paid less, and therefore changing a community, not by lifting them up, by in fact leaving them limitless, in fact. So it's the rules and regulations in that level playing field that you want KIPP to play with that we actually should get rid of so that you actually have good content, good leadership teaching kids.
Okay, and Graham, I would say maybe the next session that Basis DC holds can go much deeper on the content that's taught. I think we got a little taste of that from the video. Yes, absolutely. But that's critical. For people who don't know, Graham Down for a long time headed the Council for Basic Education, which is somewhat reconstituted now with the group Common Core, which is a tenant of ours down the hall. Okay, one last question, anybody? Before we close and we try to finish out the cookies and brownies that are back there.
Hi, my name's Rui Timberg. I have 3 children in the DC public schools, and I guess we keep bouncing back and forth between information about BASIS and then the questions that are brought up by BASIS. So I have a question for Mary. I guess you presented a proposal to the DC Charter Board, and when will that be decided on, and what are the chances that it's going to be accepted, and is there anything to do in the meantime to push that forward?
April 25th is the magic date, a day before the special election, and sign our petition, write a letter of support, give me your email address, and I will tell you everything you can do to...
Is there a concern it won't be accepted?
I don't think so. I'm pretty good.
The question was, is there concern that the charter school proposal won't be accepted by the board? Right.
I hope not.
Okay. All right. So again, April 25th, we'll get the verdict on whether the DC BASIS idea can go forward. That would be, I assume, to open in the fall of 2012.
Yes.
Okay. So we can hope coming to a community near you. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panel today.